So, good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Sanjay Dhande. I was the former director of IIT Kanpur and also headed the Mahindra Ecole Central recently. There has been quite a bit of bashing of IITs and IIMs throughout the day, and I am the first and the only one who is to defend that system. And I am happy to say that the topic that has been given now for this session is in terms of how we should, what sort of ecosystem enables an institution to provide quality higher education. So as the opening remarks, I would like to say that the education spectrum consists of three components: the primary sector, the secondary sector, the tertiary sector, which is usually called as the higher education in India. Believe it or not, we have got 4 years of investment and people take the dividend out of it for 40 years. I think nowhere you will find that this sort of an investment is so phenomenally lucrative that you make 4 years of investment and probably the entire professional career of 40 years is based on that 4 years of investment. What kind of dividends we make? It's basically the economic upward mobility of the individuals. Second one is the family stability. Third one is the personal satisfaction. And the fourth one is the societal peace that we get. All this is because of the ecosystem of the academic institution that is nurtured and for which you generally invest for 4 years. There are 7 elements of this ecosystem, and I will call upon our colleagues to then throw lights on some of them. The first one is the academic model. The academic model is probably the most important element of the ecosystem. Usually there are 4 elements of the academic model. The first one is the classical education. The second one is the professional education. The third one is the national education. And the fourth one is the personal education. Sports, culture, and all these aspects are the personal education components. The national education involves the national security as well as many other components that we heard today. The professional education is what the country has used dominantly for the last 50 years. And the classical education where the higher education started. The second element of this ecosystem is the faculty. The most crucial element. Any academic institution is not a brick and mortar institution. It is really the people who make the academic institution. And the quality of an academic institution is directly dependent on the quality of the faculty. Unfortunately, this is the resource which is the most critical resource and is lagging behind in India in terms of the shortage of faculty, in terms of low wages to the faculty, in terms of poor skills of communications of the faculty, and in terms of poor research being produced by them. In order to have the faculty to be good teachers, good scholars, good motivators, and good inspirators to the students, it's very important that academic institutions invest in developing good faculty members. The third element is the infrastructure of this ecosystem. It could be the physical infrastructure or it could be the digital infrastructure. Today, in fact, both these elements are becoming very critical. The physical infrastructure is in terms of the library, in terms of the laboratories, in terms of the classrooms, in terms of tutorial rooms, and the digital infrastructure, which also is becoming very important, consists of hardware as well as the software. The fourth element of this infrastructure ecosystem or this academic ecosystem is the pedagogy. I will not go into the details, but involves the teaching learning processes. A lot has been said about the MOOCs, the inverted classrooms, as well as the blended learning processes. I'm sure many of my colleagues will talk about it in some sense. Assessment is also a part of this pedagogy, where assessment is probably the darkest area, how to examine the students, what kind of examinations we should conduct. And some of the bad practices or the malpractices being followed in our country in terms of examinations are well known, where mass copying happens, papers are leaked, and so on. Research is another element of this ecosystem. I will not go into the details, but the important part is unless you have good ideas, good research doesn't happen. And besides good ideas, you need the equipment, you need the human resource, you also need funding for the research. All these aspects are the part of that ecosystem. Connections is the sixth element of the ecosystem. Academic institution is a social entity, and therefore students, teachers, industry, the government, the international academic institutions, all these connections matter a lot because it helps branding of the academic institution as well as it helps in terms of the ranking of the academic institutions. The last but the most important part is the accountability and the transparency, the seventh element of this ecosystem. Accountability is in both financial as well as academic accountability. The financial accountability is in terms of audit, while the academic accountability is in terms of accreditation that is being followed in our country as well as throughout the world. I am sure Professor Singh will talk more about the accreditation part of it. Transparency is also very important. In academic institutions, particularly where there is a very open atmosphere, both in terms of academic processes as well as the administrative processes, a certain amount of transparency is important. The spirit of inquiry, the freedom of intellectual activity, as well as development of the multifaceted culture is probably the hallmark of the academic institutions. And therefore, these 7 elements constitute the ecosystem of an academic institutions. Now I will call upon my colleagues to give their presentations, and then we will keep the floor open for discussion. First, Professor Singh, and then we will follow with others.
Sure.
Namaskar. Honorable Chair, distinguished fellow panelists, respected Prabhu Chawla ji, and my dear friends, particularly the dear students who are here and listening very carefully, patiently, since morning, the various deliberations and thoughts. I think this session is the one session on which nobody will disagree that quality is required for higher education. Now the question is, what is that quality framework? How to promote quality, how to enhance quality, and more importantly, how to sustain quality in a higher education institution. I'm very happy that chairperson of this session, Professor Dhande, is known for excellence in higher education. He is the one who provided leadership to IIT Kanpur for long 12 years as its director. He has very rightly put forward the various concerns related to the quality ecosystem. Since the audience is more represented by the students, I would start with what the student of today should be in terms of quality. And what are those qualities, what are those virtues, what are those characteristics in today's globalized context the Indian student should possess in him or her. One of them is, yes, in whatever subject he or she is, he should be or she should be professionally competent. Another thing is, in today's globalized context, it is not enough. Because today's institutions of higher learning, they are not developing students only for a particular region, only for a particular state, even for a nation as a whole, but we are producing our students for global competition and also global employability. And therefore, they have to have good communication skills. Professor Dhande has mentioned about digital ecosystem. Yes, in today's world, this ICT-enabled education has become of utmost importance. And therefore, even a student of arts faculty or humanities or social sciences should possess ICT competence. Another thing is that we should be socially connected. We should know our surroundings well. We should fly high, but at the same time, we should be rooted to our culture and whatever background we have. So we need to have this value-based education. The issues related to environment and sustainability are also of significance. So today's student or learner should be environmentally sensitive. So these are few characteristics. Now for this, we require the professionally competent, committed, dedicated teachers, quality teachers. Because unless we have such teachers, we want to be able to have such qualities developed in the learners. I am reminded of the saying of Dr. Sarpalli Radhakrishnan, who said that the best minds in the country should come for teaching. He also said that teaching is not a profession but a mission. Now we require not only the teachers who are professionally good in their subject, they have good delivery of their curriculum in the classroom and outside, but they should be the role models for students. And therefore, here comes the conduct of the teachers. In this context, a teacher of today should have to update himself or herself periodically in the world of knowledge. And therefore, a teacher should have love for learning, should have love for teaching, and more importantly, love for learner, which is very much missing today. We talk of Guru Shishya Parampara, we talk of the relationship between the teacher and the taught, and therefore this love for learner is very important. So we need quality teachers. Now for this, there is some eligibility for the teachers when they enter into the teaching profession at the entry level, but as I mentioned, it is always required to update their knowledge, and therefore periodical orientation, refresher of teachers in higher education is required. Rightly said so by Professor Dhande that the infrastructure is Again, so state of art, we talk of world-class universities, and we also so concerned that none of the universities of India figure into 200 top universities which have been ranked by the various ranking agencies of the world. But at the same time, if we conclude that what are the best universities' strength in the world, then there I can quote some of them. One of them is the leadership, the efficient and effective leadership in terms of the academic administrators, then ample financial resources. I have already talked about the quality faculty. Then yes, state-of-art and world-class infrastructural facilities, use of ICT, then multidisciplinary approach, large number of courses, and that too taught in interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary mode. And then large campuses, large number of students. I have a study done through my colleagues on the basis of this concern about the world-class universities. Then I found out that in a year, the expenditure of these world-class universities, because in these times higher education continuously 5 universities, Caltech, California Institute of Technology, Harvard University, Stanford University, Oxford University, they are coming 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like this. So Harvard University, the annual expenditure is, when we convert it into rupees, 25,000 crores. The Caltech, which is a comparatively small institution, 12,000 crores. So likewise, so that means we have to invest ample funds if we want to have a quality education. It is a investment in future. It is a long-term investment, and therefore, at the governmental level, at the central and the state level also, we have to prioritize education, and by providing more funds and by reflecting it in our policies and plans. Then I would like to say that for quality education, this holistic development of personality is required. And in holistic education, we should provide the ecosystem for development of all the dimensions of the personality of learners. The physical dimension, the mental dimension, the intellectual dimension of the personality, the psychological dimension, emotional dimension of the personality, and also the spiritual dimension of the personality. That is the holistic development of the personality, and therefore these aspects should be looked into by the higher education institutions for quality education. We at NAAC also, when we assess and accredit the various higher education institutions, Professor Dhande has mentioned about those, almost they are the same criteria. They are related to the teaching learning processes, the student progression, the curricular aspects, the infrastructure, the best practices, research and innovation. Research and innovation is again the area which should be reflected in our teaching learning process and the whole gamut of activities of higher education institution. But at the same time, I would like to say that these researches should be socially relevant. A university in a particular area should identify various problems in the surroundings and contribute in finding out the solutions for those problems and helping the state governments and the government at the center for these solutions. With these words, I thank the organizers for inviting me for this conclave. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.
Professor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, of course, thanks very much to New Indian Express, Shri Prabhu Chawla, for having invited me over. But more importantly, congratulations to them for sustaining and running, in my view, a very important conclave on education, which is the future for this country. And to see different stakeholders come here and participate has been very redeeming. Before I share a few perspectives on the topic that has been given to us, I wanted to acknowledge that the earlier session has actually had quite a strong impact on me. We have had three wonderful speakers, extremely knowledgeable, very articulate, who spoke about the Indianization as a topic. But somewhere along, we did get, at least I got this impression that almost all of them were not just talking about the subject, but what they wanted to communicate also was to see whether there could be a relatability of their perspective with the audience at large and the students that we are talking about. And then we heard someone in the conclusion say that Dr. Radhakrishnan said, the most scary part could be when teachers try to politicize their belief into students. So that got me really thinking and brings me to the topic that we have for our panel. 3-4 days ago, the Nobel laureate Professor Mohammad Yunus was in Karnataka, and he made a very profound statement. He said, Indians by nature are entrepreneurial. He says it's just your higher education that makes them look for more employability. Now I'm very sure that something as strong and a very powerful statement coming from somebody as well-known and eminent person like him will set up a series of debates. And over the next maybe 2 weeks, 2 months, you'll have debates in different parts of the country on are we developing our youth to become entrepreneurs, or are we making them only employable? So we Indians love to debate on everything that is given to us, every possible subject. And let's talk about the subject that we have today on higher education, on this ecosystem that we are talking about. There's a constant debate going on the role of private sector in higher education. There would be series of discussions which happen on should the private sector be participating in this or not. There will be obviously people who support such as opinion, and there will be others who don't. And then there will be this whole discussion, particularly on higher education, on do we only want to have campus-based educations, or is ODL is the right form of education? So there will be another series of debates going on. And again, I was reading the other day, and it's my belief, with a country as large as ours, with 1 billion plus people, and if we are looking at getting the gross enrollment ratio, which is let's say is one barometer of higher education in this country, to 30% over the next 5 to 7 years, we're talking of 25 million additional youth getting into higher education. So my opinion is that, you don't really need to keep saying it as either or. Everything in this country can coexist, should coexist. The other day there was someone saying that if we have to only look at campus-based education, I believe the statistics run something like this, that every 7th day you need to put up an institute, and every 46th day you need to put up a university for the next 6 years. And that's the only way that you will ever be able to teach the number of people that we are talking about. So clearly, you don't need to get into these debates. There is method in doing all this. So we also heard earlier in the panel that does education bring in knowledge, or is education being taught in universities as only an education platform or an employability platform? I mean, just to get this debate aside, why can't we say that both are equally important? There is a cross-section of people who, like the panelists before us, are so passionate about Indian history as an example, that they go ahead and encourage others to learn, they share their knowledge. And then there's a mass level of people who are looking at getting into the basic level of Maslow's hierarchy, where they want to go get themselves some skill, some job for making a living. Both could comfortably coexist in a country like this, talking about the ecosystem. We had Mr. Singh talk elaborately about quality as a part of the ecosystem. Let's look at the word enabling, which has been given to us as in this topic. And I want to use this example of technology to sort of drive home my point. How many of people in this audience do net banking? Could you put up your hands, please? Net banking. I was actually expecting more, but not bad. You have 50% or so of people who are putting up their hands saying they do net banking. Do we know which is the largest e-commerce site in this country? The students out there, yeah, I would be very surprised if I didn't get an answer as Flipkart. But actually the answer is not Flipkart. IRCTC does 2 times as large numbers, 20,000 crores is the type of transaction that takes place on IRCTC in this country every year. And the beneficiary is all the common people like you and I. So I don't think we should start again, and he talked about the quality of quantity and availability of teachers. Again, in earlier forums, I've seen this debate going on the sage at the stage, what happens to him or her. And then in my own university, every time we get into a Senate meeting and we start bringing in a proposal for a technology, you'll have 60% of the time being talked about on is technology a threat to the faculty. Then you'll have some very genuine faculty stand up and say that, they are not going to be substituted by the technology and so on and so forth. But honestly, if you look at it, again as an example, we run an online university out of Kuala Lumpur, it's called the Global Next University. In that university in KL, I have a vice chancellor, a registrar, and maybe 4 or 5 people. There are in all less than 10 people in that university physically based out of KL. All my faculty who are wonderful subject matter experts, these people are located all over the globe, in India, in the US, in Western Europe, in Australia, everywhere. Now just imagine that, as an example, if somebody is to teach a subject on Python as a language, and he or she is a specialist sitting in some part of the world, and they are able to do this effectively by the use of technology, we have largely removed the problem of teacher-student ratio in terms of a physical premises. We would have had serious challenges if I had made a request to that faculty to relocate to, let's say, Malaysia or Chennai, because that's where my students are. The chances are that they would have refused because of their own other pressures in the family and so on and so forth. But here, we are able to seamlessly get across and reach to students anywhere, and the students get the advantage of the best faculty, which otherwise would not have happened. Many of you as young students out there, I'm sure over the last 3 years, the most disruptive thing that has happened into higher education, again from my perspective, is this whole concept of MOOC. I'm sure all of you have heard of the term MOOC. Coursera came up a couple of years ago, and it's transformed the way learning was happening. And it's also very proud for all of us to know that outside of the United States, India has the largest number of enrollment to any of these online programs. So there is this hunger in this country, there is the need for us to get into quality education. And I think the players in the system, and I think the chairman of the panel very nicely put out the number of players in this ecosystem that we are talking about, the faculty, the regulator, the students, the people who operate it and so on and so forth. I think if we are in a position to make those small moves, we don't need to wait for, let's say, the regulator. The minister this morning spoke very well, and I was very delighted for her when she said to us that she is looking at a possibility of a student, let us say, who is doing a hardcore biomedical as a core subject, is also interested in Indian history, he or she would be in a position to do it. Our current curriculums did not allow us to do it so far. But it is pure music to hear from her that she is planning to do that. But my own submission to all of us who run educational institutions and the students is, we don't even need to wait for that. There is a whole bunch of certification programs which are available in India from very good people who are able to teach, and globally. So even from a hiring perspective, I come from an IT background where I remember we were hiring 25,000 people in my earlier organization every year from campuses. And honestly, there's nothing different that you can make out between a 3.2 GPA student and a 3.3 GPA student in the 10 minutes that you get to interview him or her. But if this person is going to come out and tell you that, sir, I've also got an IT degree or I'm completing my this, but you know what, I have these 3 certification programs which are of my interest. I've done this program on PMP, I've done something on supply chain, I've something done IFRS, whatever is the subject of our interest. And if that is of interest to you from an employer perspective, I think the alignment happens right there. You don't need to wait for entire regulatory systems to change and so on and so forth. So I thought this was another important issue. On the last issue, and I think Mr. Singh again touched on this, is this whole issue of quality. Quality can happen through many things, but one of the prerequisites to quality is to make the whole system very transparent, the whole system available in public domain. I just want to use an example and then I'll stop and let the other panelists go on. And it applies to many of the colleges and institutions that are springing up in this country today. If you take out a prospectus of a college which is trying to solicit students, I'm not saying all, but some of them, what you will find in the prospectus is it will talk about air-conditioned buses which are available to take the students to the colleges from wherever they live. It will talk about different types of rooms that are available for students. It will talk of multi-Q science which is available. But I think why should we not be asking that as a transparency, please also tell us how many doctorates that you have in your college, how many research projects have you submitted in conjunction, what are your innovations that you do. So if we start making demands, and today with the power of internet, the availability of information is very easy for each of the students to access. It is also true that many institutions, Mr. Singh here would, as heading NAAC, would tell us that AICT, as an example, despite having approvals, almost 170 of them have closed shop in the last 4 years. And that's because people have started realizing, the students have started realizing that end of the day quality is not what is all this paraphernalia all about, it's about core values of learning that they do. So I think there are checks and balances. Just to summarize on what I'm saying, the ecosystem has a huge role to play. We should stop this debate about an either-or opportunity, the way to learn. I think everything is acceptable, everything can find its place in a large country like us, and if we make information available and transparent to our students, they will be the best choices of what they have to do for us. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
A very good afternoon to the eminent and distinguished panel members. Dr. Dhande, who's been a guiding light and mentor to not only faculty members and students, but to several institutions. Dr. D.P. Singh, Director of NAAC, who's been instrumental in reshaping the future of higher education in India. Mr. Vaitheeswaran, who's been the driving force behind the worldwide initiatives of the Manipal group. Ladies and gentlemen, to get a factual position, today India has a student population of more than 50 million students who are entering the higher education. There are 700 universities and 35,000 colleges, out of which 59% of them are private. A big challenge, despite the large number of students, is the gross enrollment ratio, which needs drastic improvement. Our rankings are low, and we are nowhere in the world rankings. The average household expense has gone up by 30% for education, and we are willing to spend higher for quality education. This gives us an opportunity to the private sector. So providing quality education and creating an ecosystem where quality education is the focus is imperative. Now, between the years 95 and 2000, there was a huge gap in the field of quality private institutions in India. And having identified that gap, we established the Galgotias College in the year 2000 and started our journey with 40 students. Today, in spite of the fact that we have 15,000 students, we believe that expansion without quality serves no purpose. Now, we are often asked, how can institutions in this digital age provide a quality ecosystem and take their product, which is imparting of education, in the future? How can Indian universities produce competent graduates and skilled people filling the needs of the society? Now, there are several elements which go into making of a quality ecosystem, and I will try and attempt to cover them below without being redundant. I believe that building an ecosystem of a university is like building a city, complete with all aspects in terms of physical infrastructure, development of academics and policies, framework for implementing technology, and involvement of financial and human capital. And as everybody had discussed here, one of the key elements is the faculty in every university or an institution. And one of the major challenges in the Indian education sector is the availability of faculty, and there is a severe crunch in finding top quality faculty. It is important for universities to attract, retain, and recruit top quality students, top quality faculty, and talent that will drive innovation and growth over periods of time to provide an ecosystem for making of world-class institutions. Focus should be on the quality of learning than just finishing the syllabi. Now, when I visited some of the top universities in the US, I saw that most of the department heads and HODs are Indians. And they have left India and have chosen to stay in the US because of the environment which facilitates quality education and research. We tried to bring such faculty back to India, and to quite an extent we were successful, but they only come for about 1 to 2 years because they only get a sabbatical and have to head back to the parent university. So this phenomenon of reverse brain drain needs to be started as soon as possible. Now, attracting foreign faculty to India has become comparatively easier. Now, as the mindset for the faculty is that they believe that the kind of impact they can have in India is far greater than what they can do with 100 people in the US or in any other top A-grade city. When we talk about placements and employability, one of the key things Indian students look for before taking admission in any university is the placement track record and the kind of salary packages of the students of that institution that they've been getting over the years. It is important for an institution to have a strong industry linkage, and the teaching pedagogy should be in sync with the industry, so the students are employable on the very first day after graduation. In our institutions, we observed that when companies visited for recruitments, they found our students strong in analytical and problem-solving skills, but extremely weak in English and communication. Now, since this problem cannot be solved in a day or in a month, we started the Galgotia School of Lifelong Learning, where we focus on the reading, writing, reasoning, and communication skills right from the first year up to graduation. So this made a huge difference, and we saw a rise in recruitments by corporates by over 30%. These skills not only help the students get a job, but they will stay with them for a lifetime. It is important to train the students outside of the curriculum and provide them exposure to the industry during their course by inviting people from the industry and giving them a say in making them a part of designing the curriculum. We have a similar tie-up with the IBM, where the curriculum is totally designed by them, and when our students graduate, most of them are absorbed by IBM, and that reduces the employability time gap after a student has graduated. So it's a win-win for both. Now, another aspect which has been covered and is very, very crucial is the accreditation and quality processes. There is a huge gap between the set global quality standards and the standards followed by most Indian universities, and this is a matter of great concern. To ensure we follow the right path of providing quality education, there are several prestigious accreditations which an institution can voluntarily go for, such as ABIT, NAAC, AACSB, NBA, etc., which help an institution get on the path for quality. Such accreditations help a university in quality assessment, provide pedagogical tools, testing mechanisms, best practices, and ensure faculty development and enhancement of student learning. In a quality ecosystem, a student will develop competencies such as problem-solving skills, analytical skills, communication skills, and most importantly, a character which will stay with him throughout his lifetime. It is equally vital to use technology in education, and to ensure a quality ecosystem, both teachers and students are finding the use of technology a great tool in making the students learn, and the institutions are also adopting technology in the form of UMS, which is University Management Systems, for a smoother and transparent running of their institutions. Due to technology, it is now possible to access the best faculty and courseware from anywhere in the world. The use of MOOC, which is the Massive Online Open Course, has the potential to transform Indian higher education. The MOOC that are developed locally and combined with those by the universities abroad could deliver higher education at a quality never possible before. It is said that teachers will not be replaced by technology, but teachers who don't use technology will be replaced by teachers who do use technology. When we talk about teaching and research, we don't meet the global standards for research, and hardly about 4 to 5% of our research gets done from educational institutions, vis-a-vis 25% from international universities. Faculty should be provided with several opportunities to apply for research funding to either government organizations or to the private sector. Over the years, we have realized that if you don't do research, and when you build only a teaching-only institution, you don't get counted among the top universities in the world. As all top universities across the world have research as the most important aspect, which determines their placement on the global ranking scale. It is important to make industry an integral part of funding research projects. In the US, corporate alumni spend almost about $300 to over $1 billion in donating to the university, and India is far behind. Now, the role of government is also an important and crucial aspect. And there are several regulatory challenges, which means that there are several approvals, rules that a university requires to get established. And the government should let the market forces decide which institution a student would like to choose, just like in any other corporate or industry. The government perceived universities and institutions as an industrial project, as if you were setting factories. But this has been reviewed to some extent, and educational institutions now do not require things such as environmental clearances. I believe that let the market forces decide the quality an institution provides. The institutions who do not focus on quality won't be sustainable and will eventually have to be shut down. There is a huge shortage of quality and quantity of faculty in the country, and most of them are poorly paid. The government should encourage graduates to take up teaching assignments. There is an apparent lack of funding in research compared to global universities. And to create ecosystem to provide quality education, the government must facilitate research funding, and the government needs to increase the budgetary allowances in higher education. I also believe the government should treat the government and private universities at par while looking at approvals and licenses. Finally, I believe that if given the right investment, faculty, budgetary allowances, infrastructure, autonomy, India has the potential to make world-class institutions. Thank you very much.
I just want to kind of recapitulate that the fact 2 or 3 important points that have come out, which I would like to put it forward for you, and then open the floor for some questions. The first one, clearly that the most important element of the ecosystem happens to be the faculty. I think all the speakers in one way or the other have mentioned that unless we as a country design and develop the good faculty cadre, I think the quality of education, particularly higher education, is going to be crucially affected in that sense. The second most important part that has come out of the discussion today is that it appears that because of this huge student population and limited number of teaching resources, apparently there seems to be a hunger or expectation that the technological solutions like the MOOCs may help us. Obviously, the question is how it will happen, whether it will happen. I always say that the radio came and people thought education is going to change. It didn't change. The television came and people thought education is going to change. It didn't change. Now the internet has come and people are thinking that education will change. Whether it will change or not, the jury is still out in some sense. Obviously, if you want to assimilate these technologies, the academic world will have to remodel, adjust, change the habits in many, many ways in some sense. The last point is obviously there is certain economic upward mobility of the society through education, and therefore the things like the placement and other things are very important. Unfortunately, some of the management schools have created placement as a big hawa. I mean, as if everything is dependent for an academic institution on placement. When I was the director of IIT, I used to tell the first thing I would like to do is to close the placement office. Actually, my job as a teacher is not to produce the market-savvy product. My job is to produce कि बंदे को पहले बंदा तो बनाओ, फिर बाद में देखेंगे कि बिक जाएगा कि नहीं. So unfortunate part is that this placement is a racket. It's a big racket in our education, and it affects every aspect of the education system. But there is a certain element of the part of the ecosystem. Now the word is very good that has been given by us, and therefore placement is also a part of the ecosystem, and to some extent it affects negatively as far as I am concerned. Now the floor is open for discussions. Any questions that you have? How many minutes? Okay, 3 questions. The first will be here, and then we will go to the lady there.
Thank you, panel. My first question is in terms of, would the ecosystem evolve to include the nano degrees, for example, the MOOC, assisted MOOC courses to be integrated into the regular academic process? Because that is generally at the level of academic senate and so on. But does the panel think it worthwhile to be included, because these are top level courses that are offered and accessible all over the world? So assisted by in-house faculty.
Let's ask the panel. So you can start and then you can address.
Well, fortunately, I'm not a part of the regulator, so this is my as much as what you're saying, it's my wish rather than what would happen. But I completely echo what you're saying. 2 things to more elaborate to what the gentleman was asking. Building of credits through various mechanisms, which loosely as what the chairman is talking about in the ecosystem. Let's say I do a certain amount of credits and I bank it. I think it should certainly become a part of, because at the end of the day, a credit is earned by the student by he or she spending time to learn that particular area of interest. The second, I think extending it, and again it was music to hear from the minister this morning, that let us say, as an example, I've done something in Aligarh Muslim University and I am moving out and I want to carry my credit and do it in another part of the country because of other reasons. I think I heard her say today that it's going to become possible very soon. So to resonate to both what you're saying is going to happen.
The credits transfer has nothing to do with the MOOCs, I think.
No, not MOOCs. I'm saying the second part too.
Yeah. I think there is a need for an ecosystem of education within the country where the credits may get transferred. Now, that at the moment is not possible because every university is like a fortress. They don't allow anything to go out of it. But let us talk about the MOOCs first, and then we will come to the credit transfer across the universities. Yeah.
No, so across the universities, part B, as you said, but personally, again, as I said, if I'm doing, MOOC need not be something happening from elsewhere in the globe. MOOC could be an Indian MOOC. There could be rules that we can set up. But if we are in the end of the day, and not to take away anything from the good academic systems, a credit is a certain number of hours that a student spends in learning that particular course. Now, if that is equally established by the academic senate, can be done by an alternate, like a MOOC, I strongly believe that we should add it to the total credit system that he or she enjoys.
So the point is, the MOOCs has to be adapted to the Indian conditions. Every technological contraption gets adapted. For instance, when the mobile phone came, I never understood. The driver told me कि मैं miss call दे दूँगा. So I thought the phone is made to pick up the phone. He says, no, don't pick up the phone. I will give you a missed call, because then he saves his cost of the call. So it is adaptation of the technology for Indian conditions. Similarly, I guess this particular technology will have to be adopted. You have to add something?
Hello. Yeah, I believe that the MOOCs only enhance a learning. And suppose there is a subject being taught in the university where the faculty is average. So you can get access to the MOOCs which are taught by the world's best universities and from the best faculty and enhance your learning. So I think it's a great enhancing tool for universities which can be used.
But on the negative side, Dhruv, I would say that in India, students are not habitual to do anything outside the classroom. Very little of it, or only at the time of exam. MOOCs and many of these techniques require tremendous amount of discipline on the part of the students, which I'm unfortunately to say that doesn't exist. As a matter of fact, MOOCs require students to do a lot of work before coming to the class. How many students do study before coming to the class? The question is very, very negative. I mean, sort of. So to some extent, adaptation of the technologies is very important as compared to the technologies itself. There seems to be a big hawa about the technologies, but they may fail if not adopted properly in the Indian conditions. You want to add, sir? Okay. Now we will go to the question. The lady there, we said. And then the last question. Okay.
Good evening, sir. I am Pramila from Guru Nanak College. And as our Galgotia sir suggests, he was telling in abroad you could find all Indian teachers, rather this one. In a way we can feel proud. But 60% of the IITians and IIMians are going abroad. And
no, that is not correct. That is not correct, madam. I am from IIT, so now I am going to defend IITs, though I took a lot of beating throughout the day.
Yeah.
But this statistics is not correct. Okay? They may go eventually, all Indians eventually go. So why to blame IITians?
No, I am not blaming, sir. We are supposed to take some steps to retain them.
Anyway, the question.
Yeah, well, I believe that the kind of learning environment and the culture there are in the universities abroad, they are more prone to go to foreign universities because if there is a project which they have to undertake, if there is less bureaucracy and the funding is much easier, whether it's from the industry or whether it's from the university itself. So I think the environment is such that it attracts professors from India. But again, as the reverse brain drain has started, and now, as I said, that the faculty is seeing that change. They want to contribute and come back and make that change in India, and they feel that they can make a greater impact when they are in India now. So I think that reverse brain drain is already started, and now we are able to attract and retain the faculty.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think Madhu.
A very good afternoon to the panel members. I'm not sure if my question is relevant to the topic or not, but since the mention about the number of colleges that we have in India, like 600 plus universities, then 35,000 colleges, and 59% of them are private colleges. We have IIT Mains and IIT Advanced for the admission in government colleges, but we don't have any exam all over India for getting into private institutions. I'll tell you my thing. We get into engineering for either it's our choice or it's our parents' wish, because parents think that after doing engineering, my son will obviously he will get a job. So I just want to ask you, will it be relevant if we have an exam all over India for private universities?
So what I make of your question is that all the private universities should get together and make one exam. Is that right?
No, I'm not saying that they all will mingle up and have, but somewhat like that.
Okay. Well, every private university is an independent setup, and when you look at the examination, we take the government examinations as a part of selecting the students. So of course there are some universities which have their own examination, but it can be a mix of both. I don't know whether we can have a common consensus between the private universities to conduct their own exam. I think that is something which...
There is a news in the newspapers today or yesterday about possibility of a medical exam being conducted across the country with just one exams, etc. So, the point really is that rather than doing this, let me give you a suggestion. That is, the size of what we have as a country, again, as what I said, is so large and so complex. I think there is an opportunity for everything. There's a book by a gentleman by name Bill Hogan, which says how to eat an elephant. I think we have higher education as an elephant, and the answer is slice by slice. So let's look at piece by piece on what we want to do, and I'm sure we'll be able to move ahead.
But according to me, the entrance examination has brought in a huge stress in our system. Actually, when you go from primary to secondary education, there is no entrance examination. When you go from secondary to tertiary education, the kid is supposed to give at least a dozen entrance examination, and that is a tragedy of our society, that we have created a very large I will reserve my harsh comments, but according to me, unless we reform the transition from secondary to tertiary education, this stress is going to increase in our society. It is already showing up in many, many tragic ways. It will going to increase unless we stop and modify our entrance to the tertiary education. That's very necessary. Anyway, there is one more question. Oh, okay. Then we will ask you, because the speaker is asking a question, so we'll have to give Madhu the last chance, actually. So,
Sir, I'm
first him, you don't have a mic there. Can you give a mic to her? Yeah, you please go ahead in between.
I'm Sankar Narayanan from Weltech Arts College. So I am asking one question. We're talking about quality education. So for quality education, we can go for an evaluation system in entry level should be modified, or you have to monitor more, or otherwise you have to monitoring of the exit level. So if you go for an entry level monitoring system of evaluation means, so we can go for an our literacy level will be degraded, so it may be an decreasing. So if at the exit level you have to strengthening means you can get our good quality teachers. The good quality teacher will go for an generation to generations. So now question is how we can go for remodifying and strengthening of our evaluation system.
Professor Singh,
I think quality at both stages is necessary. At the entry level and also at the exit level. I correlated the quality of students with the quality of teachers. And therefore, at the entry level of teachers also, we have stringent eligibility conditions. And also, they should be updated from, as I mentioned, from time to time, periodically about the knowledge base and the skills, the professional competence, and whatever is required in the globalized context of India. And similarly, the case is with the students. And therefore, not only in the classrooms, but overall performance of students should be assessed at the exit level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we close. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the audience which was here, and thank you for the speakers also.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, and we request Mr. Chawla to present our speakers with these mementos. Well, ladies and gentlemen,